Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Discover New Music podcast from Pelt Music. Shortly, we will be chatting with Godeater, who we recently featured over on our Discover New Music playlist on Spotify with their single God Complex. But before then, the usual reminders from myself. If you would, please do follow us on social media. We are on Facebook at Pelt and on Twitter and Instagram at Pelt Music. And again, if you would, please do hit that like button, hit that subscribe button wherever you're watching or listening. Well, welcome everyone to another episode of the Discover New Music podcast. We're absolutely delighted today to be joined by Ross from Godeater. Thanks for joining us, Ross. How are you this fine evening?
Hello, I'm good. I'm actually just home from work, so looking forward to talking about anything that isn't actually my day job.
Yeah, I know that feeling very, very well. So let's oblige you, Ross. Let's dive straight in. So the first topic that we always feature on our Discover New Music podcast, because obviously it's a podcast aimed at bringing new music to people, bands that perhaps people aren't familiar with. So we always start off with what we call the origin story. So obviously, Godeater, have been going for a little while now. Actually, probably a bit longer than a number of the bands that we've discussed this subject with on the podcast. But what is the origin story of the band? How did you guys get to this point?
I was actually talking about this the other day on a completely unrelated thing, just like uninterview related, unband related, and it kind of come up. So I actually do remember now. So we've been a band for 6 years now. 2016 is kind of the starting point, and I would say we made a bit of headway in 2017, 2018, and then 2019 is kind of ultimately when the band, I would say, as it is currently, and where it's kind of going, kind of took off. But basically in kind of 2016, I got a message from Andy and Will, basically kind of being they were in another band together, and I think it's kind of alt rock, kind of alt metal kind of thing, and basically they were we really want to play something with blast beats, effectively, something heavier, something faster, that's what we are into really at the end of the day, and we kind of want to try it. And what do you do? What are you up to? Because ultimately at the end of the day, I've played guitar for years, I've written music for years, but I kind of reached a point in my very late teens of I just could never get anything to kind of take off.
Yeah,
I couldn't get a consistent kind of lineup, and I could never really find the group of people to play what I guess I maybe wanted to play. And then just you kind of approach your kind of mid-20s, people's vibes kind of change. So I kind of was I guess I'll still love playing guitar, still love writing music, but it's not really for me, I guess, the whole touring thing and whatever. So they reached out to me, and I was like, yeah, I'll give it a try. What have you got? Have you got songs? Have you got a drummer? Because that's always the absolute deal breaker for this style of music, the really extreme metal stuff. If you've not got the drummer, it's not going anywhere, because that is actually at the end of the day, the foundation of the band is the drummer. And they were like, well, we might actually have someone. And it turns out they did, who's unfortunately not in the band anymore. Again, times just change. So they'd reached out to me. I'd known Will for years at that point, just in sort of passing. And we went to see, we were all at the same cattle decapitation show. And I kind of met Andy for the first time. I met our then drummer, kind of properly. I knew him in passing, I didn't really know him. And then we just went into a practice room. And I kind of showed up on day one, because I just write music, basically. I showed up on day one with this is my song, and here it is, and here are the guitar parts, and here's the bass part, and here are the drums, and I always use synths, so here are the click tracks, and here's the backing track. It was on day one, in the rehearsal room, and I think we were all a bit okay, this doesn't really feel like messing about anymore, even though you've got one song. It was the strangest thing. And then from there was a real kind of sense of, okay, so we should do an album. And then that kind of became an EP while I was working on an album. Got to 2017, played some shows. 2018, played some shows. And then, yeah, kind of going into 2019, we'd finished our first album, which is called All Flesh is Grass. We'd finished that, and then I kind of basically had got to a point of being like, I know we want to do more with this, but like we don't really know how to or who to talk to. So we spoke to basically a local promoter in Glasgow, who does like loads of like 6 shows, just asking kind of advice, and basically he agreed to kind of manage us, and he's still our manager now.
Great. Yeah.
So yeah, and it's just since then it's just been okay. So we did an album, 2020 hit. That's obviously a disaster. We all know that.
Yeah.
But I kept writing music, kept releasing it with the band, and now it's kind of like, okay, album 2, let's go again. Like we've already been on tour last year. We did some festivals, and again now we're ready to go again. Like we're back on tour in 3-4 weeks, I think now. So that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Like minus kind of ups and downs. Like that's pretty much the like where it started, where it is now, and it doesn't really feel like 6 years.
No.
It feels like as good as yesterday that I walked into that practice room for the first time. And we haven't even practiced there in years, but like it was just that from day one. It felt more like a cohesive kind of like, okay, this is a band. This is like we're talking about t-shirts, we're talking about CDs, we're talking about doing an album. Like it just felt really like quite serious from the get-go, and I think that's something that I warmed to quite a lot. And again, now I've just kind of like, I guess at the end of the day, like I'm almost the kind of driving force of the band, which is a complete accident as well. Like I kind of went into it being like, oh, well, you guys kind of have this idea. Like I'll come in and play some guitar. Like I might write a few riffs, and now it's just like spiraled from there.
Yeah, no, it has, and obviously, you're in a really good place now, and we probably don't want to dwell too much on the the last couple of years, but when I heard you say we were just hitting that point in 2019, instantly you just think it's not a good time to keep that momentum going, is it?
I mean, it's not a good time in theory, but I also feel like we released an album, we did a few tours, we never really toured as a band before. Like we got out of Glasgow fairly quickly as a band. Like I will say that. I think our second ever show was in London, and then we were doing like a festival. It was quite 0 to 100, pretty quickly. And I actually think 2020 happening the way it did gave me, in particular as a writer, like that kind of time that you're just not going to get to do a second album, to work on it, to work behind the scenes, to develop the band in a way that ultimately we'd never really had time to do before then, and also didn't really have the expertise internally to do in terms of growing your numbers, in terms of a social presence, in terms of new things to try. So actually at the end of the day, like I view the past few years as like actually a real growing point for the band. Maybe not conventionally in a sort of going on tour and rinse and repeat the cycle thing, but like in terms of actually knuckling down and having some time to think about things, to try some new things, to evolve internally a little bit, has actually been really good. I think 2020 in particular was a very creative year for me, and I feel very fortunate actually that things worked out in the way they did in terms of my work situation, like kind of job situation, my home situation. Like I was very lucky. And since then, I mean, we have had, some changes in the band. There's been ups and downs, but like ultimately I'm kind of sitting here with the other guys in 2022, like ready to put out this new album, which has been a lot of work behind the scenes and a lot of, the same old discussion, but a lot of blood, sweat and tears has gone into it. But I feel like we're in actually a really good place as a band, to kind of start that growth again. And we haven't really fallen off, despite the fact that there's been the past kind of 2 years, which is nice.
It's really refreshing, to be honest, to hear you talk about it as such, because obviously, the pandemic has decimated a lot of the music industry, and a lot of bands sadly didn't make it out of the other side. So it is really nice to hear that other side of it, and show that there were relatively some positives to it for some people, which is great.
I mean, I'm putting a really nice positive spin on it. What I'm not showing it are the days I've sat in here in my room just like sobbing into the corner. But by and large, I'm viewing it as, you know, a really, not really a positive experience, but actually at the end of the day, a positive kind of time for the band, which is nice at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I feel quite good that I'm able to do that, because I think if I'd been sitting here now without it having worked that way, without the progression we've been able to do, without being able to play live, I think I really would be maybe having not second thoughts, but I think I would be feeling very differently about it. So it's nice that I've been able to not feel like that.
Yeah, no, it definitely is really, really nice. And you spoke about, you know, being able to take that time to write, and you specifically said to be able to write some riffs, which obviously brings us naturally on to God Complex, your single that you've just put out, which obviously we featured over on the
There are a lot of
playlist.
riffs in it.
There is an awful lot of awesome riffs in the song. You know, we've really enjoyed it, hence we put it on the playlist, and we obviously wanted to get you on to discuss it. You know, so talk to us about the creation of God Complex. You know, how did that song come together, and where on earth did them riffs come from? Yeah.
I mean, they all come from my rubbish little brain. Like, to be honest, like it's weird because we kind of finished our first album, and to be honest, see, before it was out, I'd already kind of started writing, because like I say, like I'm always constantly writing something. I've got an idea, whatever. So I'd kind of started writing it, and I actually think the chord progression in the chorus of God Complex is one of the first things I had for this new album. And it's kind of wired into like a couple of other songs on the album, particularly the first song into this God Complex, because it's the second track on the album.
Yeah.
So I had that quite early on, and it kind of just sat there, and then I gradually started kind of building it up. But yeah, it's a weird song for us. Like I keep saying to people, like I'm quite surprised for us how much people seem to be enjoying it, because at the end of the day, like you listen to songs like The Hatchet that we released as the first single,
Yeah.
you listen to sort of previous songs, You Are No Exception and Silent Spring being two songs that really, like, it's fast, it's all over the place, it's just all a bit wild. Whereas this is a much more kind of, I wouldn't really say laid back, but like it's a groovier pace. It's more almost, it's quite fast, but like it's more mid-tempo, and there's more openness to it, and it's more like almost a straight up kind of metal song to me than death metal. Like I know there's blast beats and stuff in it, and it's still obviously extreme metal, but it's definitely a more straight up metal song. So I suppose in a sense that is actually why more people seem to be like kind of latching onto it rather than the ridiculous stuff that we've been kind of known for doing from time to time. So yeah, part of it I'd say is like quite early on in the album I'd kind of come up with it, and I didn't really know if it would make the cut. And then I kind of, you know, I write in tab, like guitar tab a lot of the time, so I can send everybody these little like MIDI versions, which everybody hates apart from me because I'm like used to them. But I finally did like an actual demo, and I'm sure this was like one of the first songs that kind of came back, and everyone was just like, yeah, that's really like, like interesting is maybe not the right word, because I don't feel like it's all over the place and it's interesting in that sense, but like it felt like it was onto something a little bit different for us. And I think that's something we've wanted to do with every release. Like if you go through from even our first ever demo, first EP, first album, and everything since, there's been like a clear like evolution of the band, even though it's still clearly got our sort of little signature to it, I guess you could say.
Yeah, no, definitely. And, you know, evolution is a great word for it. And you know, it's something that all bands have to do. And I think, you know, God Complex, as you say, probably is the most digestible single perhaps that you've put out there so far. And yeah, that's probably why it's getting the reaction it's getting, other than the fact that it's obviously an awesome song, you know. So let's touch just quickly, obviously, on The Hatchet. So obviously that was the first single that you've put out from the new album that we are going to talk about in just a moment. So regarding The Hatchet, you know, what about that song made it stand out to you that you thought, well, this needs to be the lead single from the album?
So for me, I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that in your sort of 3.5 to 4 minutes, that ultimately is an evolved version of what we've been doing up to this point. Like it completely jumps off the the sort of chaotic, doesn't really repeat itself type structure. It's got like the fast kind of choppy riff at the end. It's got the sort of orchestrations in the middle and that big symphonic section. It's got the sort of like kind of repeats but doesn't really, kind of variation of the intro riff. Like, it just felt to me like that was the song I listened to back out of the 8 that are on the album, and I kind of was just like, that's number one. Like, it goes off with a single snare hit at the start, and it just sounds like us as a band kind of moving forward. And kind of lyrically, it kind of taps into that idea as well, though, of like, a lot of it's about kind of facing up to those difficult conversations that you don't really want to have. And I think that's been such a prevalent kind of topic in the past few years, that not just musically, but lyrically, it kind of taps into, and really felt like, for me anyway, that it should have been, and well, was the first single off the album, before we could then kind of drop off the pace and try something a little bit different to see how it went. Because I think the original plan was potentially to do God Complex first, and I kind of put the old steel toe cap down and was like, I really don't, not that I think it's a bad song, and not that I don't think people will like it, but I think it is just too weird a step, which sounds bizarre to say because it is just like a metal song, and you're like, well, how bizarre a step can it really be? But I really did feel that it couldn't be like the first single, so I'm quite glad we've held it back and done it as a second one, and you are now beginning to see a variation in the album through releasing them in that order as well. And it was also cool to like put them out as the 2 songs when God Complex came out, because you put them together on Spotify, and people can hear that they joined together, which is it's cool.
It is. It's very cool, and you know, also very cool is the aesthetic to the bands. I mean, you talked a bit about social presence earlier, and I think a big part of that nowadays is, you know, the visuals that come around a band, and I think that's obviously, having researched this interview, something that, you know, you guys are doing really, really well. And as part of that, we should talk about the videos for the 2 songs we've just talked about, so The Hatchet and God Complex. The videos really tie into each other and work together. So where did the concept for that come from, and you know, what was it like putting it together?
Mayhem, honestly. So it was originally kind of meant to be like, I've wanted to do like a kind of narrative thing in videos for a while now, because I think it's interesting. Like, I love films, I love cinema. I think there's so much more to be done visually than we are 5 grown adults playing in a warehouse or a field. And I know that's such a cliche thing to actually say, but like, I think there's so much more that can be done with it. And I know budgets are a problem, especially if you're a small band like us. Like, we don't have a big budget, but we try and work with people who want to make it work with us and who want us to be involved. Because like, in making this sort of artwork, like, I wasn't there when the artwork was being made, but like, I've been there when all the videos have been getting done. Like, I'm behind Callum McMillan, who shot them all and has edited them all. Like, I've been there the whole time. But yeah, it was originally kind of meant to be a more like kind of half narrative, half band type scenario, where we're going to go to like a studio space and shoot it and all this kind of stuff. But as a band, geographically, we are a little spread out, and you're still kind of trying to navigate, ultimately at that point, COVID, unfortunately. You're trying to navigate flights, buses, trains, planes, flights and planes. I've said that twice, but cars, like, there are a lot of moving parts, and I think it kind of came to sort of crunch time, and we were like, why don't we just do it as a narrative and tie it in with the artwork, which is like the artwork as well. Like, it's a photograph of like a thing that we've kind of had made. That makes it sound really highbrow and big budget. I can assure you the pieces bought to make the artwork, not expensive at all. I'm out here just like spelling the secrets of it now. But it kind of started out as this kind of mixed kind of idea, and then just because of things how worked out, we were like, okay, well, why don't we just do a full narrative, do it over the course of the 3 videos, because we have that musically, it would be really cool to tie it in visually as well, and then have your sort of like, I guess I keep calling it the orb.
Yeah, yeah.
And like that's featured in the videos as well. And you know, we had a lot of development on that because I'll tell you, I mean, it was originally meant to be like a globe, and then it was meant to be something else. And we just kind of had to like, we need to do this and we need to do it now. Otherwise, it's not getting done and the album's not coming out. So let's do this. And fortunately, you know, Callum, like I say, is so good at just trying things and being hands-on and getting into it that is honestly, I'm really happy with how they've all turned out. And again, like you've said, the feedback we've had, again, similar to God Complex, but also to the videos and to the art direction this time around, has been so like refreshing and positive. Like I actually do, I think I sound a little bit speechless about it, but I really am, because a lot of what I wanted to do going into this album is like, I was like, musically I think it's pretty good, like it's cool, but I really wanted to step up the visual side of the band. And like I say, it's been through ups and downs, but I think we have actually done something really cool with it. And the fact that people have been coming back and saying that and really focusing on it, in particular with the videos as well, has just been so like kind of affirming in the choices that were made, which has just been great. So yeah, it's a little bit of stress to make that decision, but ultimately the payoff has just been fantastic in terms of the feedback. So thumbs up all around.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's fantastic when you get a vindication of the vision you had like that. And obviously, you know, I completely agree with it. You know, the visuals around the artwork for the band and the videos work so well together, and really, you know, help set you apart from, you know, other you know, bands that are out there, which is what everyone needs to do in this day and age of the internet, when everyone, you know, has got so much music at their disposal. Is you need to stand out. And you know, I think a lot of bands,
so hard.
Yeah,
like it's so hard as well though, because ultimately you want to kind of toe that fine line of, we're doing what people are interested in, but we want to do it close enough that it taps into that, but like also so far away from it that people are like, oh my god, that's different, like let's jump ship. Like it's such a harsh like balance to find. But I think almost in doing our own thing with this, it's not even made it an issue, which is really cool as well, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it must be, you know, really exciting for you to be on the cusp of the release of the new album. So Vespera is out on September the 30th. Obviously, listeners can head along to the shop to pre-order it. There's some great bundles on the band's website, and we'll obviously link to that in the bio of the podcast. I did wonder when I looked and saw how, you know, how many different bundles and everything were on there, and obviously done a good job of that. I was looking out personally for the orb to see whether perhaps people could buy an orb, but
truth be told, I want the orb back, but I don't actually have it sitting here. Part of the like original thing, I was like, oh, we could make it.
Yeah.
Like, why don't we just make the artwork? Because originally it was actually meant to be a digital thing, and then things move on, projects get busy, all the usual stuff. But I was like, why don't we just make it? Like, why don't we just get some stuff and put it together and make it happen? And I think everybody else is a bit like, are you what? Like, why would you do that? Like, that sounds like a lot of stress and work, and it might be quite expensive. And I was like, well, it's not really going to be more expensive than like getting it done digitally. It's just going to take like a bit of work in terms of getting it to look right. So yeah, now I'm like, I want the orb back. I want it to sit in my room, and I want to just sit with it, like the guy in the video, but not going mental like that.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely not. But Vespera. Then talk to us about the album. Yeah, what was the recording process like for you for this album compared to perhaps the other albums? You know, we touched on it probably a little bit earlier. And obviously the big one is what should fans expect from the album?
In terms of the writing and recording process, long. It's like the only way I can describe it now. Like, I had a lot of the, if not all of the instrumental stuff done over a year ago. So it's kind of sat there for like a while. And then just trying to get like kind of studio space do everything else, because I record like all the guitars and stuff at home. That's the way we've always worked. It's just it's a kind of workflow we have now.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're kind of dealing with the whole, like I said earlier, like kind of COVID, and do we go somewhere to do it? Do we do it at home? Can we do it somewhere, or can we do it at home? Like lots of questions kind of like that. And then kind of when we were getting to a point of maybe starting to like continue recording it, we were back out on tour, we were back playing festivals and shows, and that impacts onto everybody's time. So yeah, the recording process was long. At this point, I probably never want to hear the album ever again. Just in time to really sit and play it live, and what else would I rather be doing than not listening to it? But yeah, in terms of what people can expect, I mean, it really is an evolved version of the band. I think it really refines the songwriting process. Like I know on our first album, it all, again, the format's kind of the same. It all flows into one another. It all blends together. But I feel like on the first album, there's a few points where you're like, is that a song? Like, has the song ended? Like, I'm not too sure about that. Whereas on this one, it's like, it all blends together, but there's very clear points where it like ends and moves on. And I think it's paced much better as well. In terms of the actual sound, it's a pretty dreary sounding record. I'm not going to lie about it. I think partially writing it in sort of 2020 into 2021, that impacted a lot because it was an out for me. Like especially when I'd kind of gone back to work and I was like, I'm doing this day job, but I'm not getting to do shows, I'm not getting to tour, I'm not getting to see anybody. I'm actually going to work, working, and coming home, or I'm trapped here in my room working from home. So I think a lot of that filtered into it. For me, it's very atmospheric, it's very dreary, and it's very like, I'd say it's very like aggressive sounding. Like once you kind of get through that initial sort of shimmer of the atmosphere, it's just like a really cutting record, musically and especially in the lyrical side of it. Like, yeah, I mean, it's you're from the UK, like what it's like living here.
Yeah.
Like it's not good. It's quality of life is down, cost of living is up.
Yeah.
You've got a government that arguably nobody I know voted for.
Exactly.
It's pretty, we're beyond calling it sad, really. And I think the lyrical side of this album really does, we've touched on it before. We've touched on the climate change side of things. We've touched on veganism. We've always been quite a social band in that sense, like in terms of your sort of social surroundings,
yeah.
and culture and political kind of things. And I think this album really taps into it, but in a really personal way. So yeah, I think it's, like I say, it's an aggressive record. I think it might actually be quite a relatable record to a lot of people, particularly sort of people I'm 32, so I'm like kind of not young, but like kind of peak weird millennial, mid 2000s credit crunch. Like that's me all over. I think the first album did lean heavily into the kind of topics of veganism, which I think is great. Like I'm personally, I'm vegan. I still am. I'm always going to be. But I think that maybe alienated some people who maybe could have latched onto the record if they had just listened. But I think it maybe that was a little. I'm glad we did it, because I think you should write about what you want to write about and what you know. And I think that delivers the best, most honest performance. But I think this time it's done in, with that similar mentality, but it's definitely something that's a lot more open for people to really listen to and dig into, actually. And I think there's a lot more personal kind of nuance to it that people can really latch onto and interpret in their own way as well, which is really interesting.
Yeah, no, and it's really brave these days for artists actually to be willing to touch, potentially tricky subjects. Obviously, a fair few years ago now, something called Brexit, really divided the country, and we've remained divided since then on a lot of subjects. And obviously, when you are vying for the attention of listeners and getting fans in, I think a lot of bands shy away from hitting them important subjects, because they're afraid that, I could lose me part of that audience. Is that something that you are conscious of? But obviously, as you say, you feel it's the right thing to do to speak up.
I think it's the right thing to do. I went through a period in my life where I maybe wasn't so enthused about doing that. Like, I'll be honest about that. But now I'm like, nah, this is bad. Like, this is bad. So like, you kind of have to. And if you're feeling a certain way and you can channel it into, like I say earlier, like an outlet, like, do it. Like, it's so cathartic. And I've spoken about this before on other interviews, and I actually it does bum me out a little bit when we kind of do these things. And in the last album, like I say, it was heavily sort of climate change, kind of veganism. They were the kind of main subjects, and to kind of see people like metal fans angry about it was just sad at the end of the day. Like, they kind of keep your politics out of my metal. I was like, metal is inherently like a political genre of music. Like, it is. It's left field. It's very like almost left leaning, and like even you've got those early like Megadeth records, like Peace Sells, but who's buying? Like, that's about as anti-war as it kind of gets. Like, it's so bizarre to me that people have lost sight of that, and I like being like, it's not controversial because it's not. No. Like, you can't call it controversial, but I like having something that we can talk about on top of it, and I like having just something that people can get like stuck into, whether they agree or disagree. At the end of the day, like, if it's something to talk about, it's something to talk about. And I love that ours happens to be very politically and socially charged at the end of the day. Like, that's what I like. That's what I want to listen to.
Exactly. It is really important. I think we need more artists such as yourselves that are willing to do that, especially in the current climate. I think a lot of people are blinkered. You mentioned bands like Megadeth. There's probably a lot of Megadeth fans that don't realise, the meanings behind those songs. I mean, there was a Twitter storm a while back with people realizing that Rage Against the Machine are a political band. So it's like, well, what machine were they raging against? I don't know.
Like, I couldn't possibly have known that Rage Against the Machine were a political band. Like, oh, come on. Like, it's literally, you say, it's in the name. And then it's like, in any one of the lyrics, it's right there. Like, it's not even hidden. And I mean, I love that. Like, I remember when I was like, was 10 or 11, and my friend bought the like Rage Against the Machine CD, and he put Bomb Track on, and it blew my little mind. Like, I just never heard anything that like visceral, and like a critique. And I mean, like, at that young age, even like, I would say I was quite politicized and kind of understood things that were, obviously I don't have like a massive understanding, but I think I did have that. And then when I heard a band doing it, I was like, oh my God, this is like hell yeah. This is great. Like, this is, I love Limp Bizkit, but like, he's effectively rapping about his junk. Like, great. Although in hindsight, I have gone back to Limp Bizkit in far later years and been like, actually, this was a bit of social commentary that is interesting. But like, at that time, when I was that young, I was like, yeah, the political thing kind of just like sparked something off in my brain, and that was it. And I guess that is informed kind of what we do now. And I like that people can, the feedback that we get, that people who do listen to it and do latch onto it is great. And like, I know that people have come up to us and spoken to us and been like, actually, you really did make me think about something that I didn't really know how to explain. I'm not going to say that we're always right or whatever, but like, I like the fact that we've been able to have conversations with people, even in interviews like this, or just people at shows. Like, it's really cool. And if people maybe don't agree, but they want to overlook it and just listen to the music, like, that's cool as well. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
there's enough riffs.
Oh, there
If I'm
is.
feeling extra nice, I might even release an instrumental version one day.
Oh, that sounds excellent. But yeah, that is, what I think we're lacking in society is being able to have a conversation. It's very much now. Actually, I don't agree with you. Therefore, you're wrong because I'm always right. But it's not always the case. There's a lot of grey in society. But yeah, we've gone down a rabbit hole there, haven't we, Ross?
Yeah, a very deep rabbit hole that I could talk about for ages, but I'll save that for another time.
Yeah. So obviously, you've got this fantastic record that's going to come out. We've had a sneak peek of it, and listeners are in for a real treat when it comes out. So yeah, there's two sides of the music industry, isn't there? There's the recorded side, and then there's the side that I think we'll probably love slightly more is the live side. And you mentioned obviously getting that out and playing shows again post-pandemic, which must have been really cathartic and great for you to get out and do. And of course, you've got some shows coming up. You're going to be touring with Paleface and Pint Glass in September, aren't you? So
yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a giggle. That's what I keep saying about it. I'm like, it's going to be a giggle because I feel like Paleface are quite not a serious band, but I feel like it's quite dark and very moody. And then there's Pint Glass, who are the loveliest bunch of guys. Some of them have been friends of ours since we started this band. They're just nice, but it's great patter. It's fun. And then there's us kind of at the bottom of the bill. And I'm like, are we deadly serious? Or can we have fun? Or what's the deal here? And then we'll play live. And our live show is much more in line with I don't know, a fun band, I suppose you could say. I know a lot of bands in our sort of style, the technical death metal or whatever you want to call it, just kind of stand there, which is, you kind of need to if you're playing this stuff. But I don't know, I think we get into it far more. So actually, in terms of being on the tour, I think we're maybe a bit of a misfit in terms of the vibe of our band and maybe the sound a little bit. But in terms of the actual show, I think all three bands are on the same wavelength in terms of putting on the good show. And I think it'll be fun. It'll be a good tour. It's also the first time we're going out since December last year, so I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, you must be. But to be honest, I love the shows where the bands aren't necessarily all exactly the same. Obviously you want them to be from the same kind of world, but it's nice to get an eclectic,
nice little mixed bill. I mean, that's why I quite like I know I look at the sort of Impericon, the Never Say Die tour, and I go, oh, that's my back hurts. My back hurts. The doors are at 5. Why are there 7 bands here? But I look at the bill and I go, actually, you know what? That's sick. On the same bill, you've got Whitechapel, Fallujah, and then someone like Body Snatcher. And I'm like, what? They're all on the same bill. What? But it's so cool to see that for me. I love that. I love so many different styles of music, but so many different styles of metal. And to kind of be able to get that on one bill, I think is just, it's great. So I like seeing it, and I like being part of it as well, which is nice.
Definitely. And you must be really excited to play the new material as well.
3 whole new songs and 3, I keep calling them classics now. 3 new songs, 2 singles, and 1 new one that you can't hear until release day.
Yeah, so listeners definitely need to find one of these shows and head along. We've already talked about social media, and of course that's the best way these days to stay up to date with bands, to be able to obviously follow the releases and the shows that are going on. So Godeater, I've got your details here. You're on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter, all at Godeater UK, which is fantastic that you've got the same handle for each one, because quite often I have to read out 3 different ones.
I worked hard to get that many years ago, and I think it was different at one point, and then I just kind of waited long enough. But it's the same on the 3 of those. It's the same on our Twitch channel, our TikTok, and our merch store. So you can find it everywhere. I think it's the same on YouTube as well. So I've got it everywhere.
You've got it nailed down, which is excellent. So you score points for me on that one, definitely. So you mentioned the likes of Twitch and TikTok. Then I did. I was going to ask you about those because I have to admit, all over my head, those channels. But it seems that the band are quite active across social media. So, you know, how important is it to you as a band to have, you know, that additional kind of presence?
I mean, make or break. Like
Yeah.
at this point, like I was talking about this in work actually before I came home earlier. Like I've used social media as an individual as long as I can remember. Like since I was like 14, I think I was on it. Maybe technically, see if you include forums, like the OG internet, like basement dwelling stuff. I've probably been on social media since I was about 11, technically. And then did MySpace thing, Vivo, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, like the lot. And then, so it's always been important. Like I know it as a fan of finding bands that I wouldn't have found those bands. Like even some of my favorite bands, I would never have found without social media.
Yeah.
So even as a fan, I follow bands on it. I'm always looking at stuff. I know how important that is. But in terms of the sort of newer stuff, I mean, like TikTok is, I'm trying to get onto it. I'm trying to do it more. I feel like it goes against like everything I've been kind of taught or learned about, as horrible as it sounds, like content making.
Yeah.
Like, oh, everything should be high quality, out the window. Pixelated memes, that's the way to go. Like, it's so strange to me, and how constant it is and how loud it all is. I'm like, there's no, why is everybody yelling? Why is all the audio like clipped? Like what? Why do people enjoy this? But at the end of the day, like I view it as a platform to help not just promote Godeater, our music, our merch, but to engage with people. And that's really where like the Twitch channel has just excelled. Like the Twitch and the combination of Twitch and Discord allowed us in 2020 and 2021, and still every Monday and Thursday, every week, we're on there and we're speaking to people. Like we're maintaining contact with them. We're like the most important thing for developing a band is almost the engagement to me now, and engaging with fans and speaking to people and converting people who are maybe not sold on you, and making that like communication channel just not only exist but like actually using it. And honestly, see the fact that we weren't able to speak to people at like the merch table, at shows, we weren't able to meet people, but there's just some randomer that's found you on Twitch because you're listening to metal music and wants to talk about metal, and then like, oh wait, you play in a band? Like I thought you were just some like random guy. And I'm like, no, actually I play in a band. Like the one of the other guys does it another week, another day of the week. Like it's been such a lifeline for us. And honestly, like it's small, like I'll be honest, it's small numbers, but like it's been really cool to use. It's been really cool to engage with people. And at the end of the day, like I say, that's kind of what helps you grow as a band. Like it's all well and good putting your song on Spotify and putting your music video on YouTube, but if you're not actively out there, you know, pushing that or speaking to people who are commenting on it or taking it to people, or people aren't coming to you, like there's a bit of a problem. And the fact that I think we've been able, you know, as I was saying earlier, like I've spent the past 2 years like actually just working like on the band, we've been able to try these things and get them to work and to use them and still use them. You know, I think that if I was looking at us from the outside as a prospective sort of manager, agent, press person, label, whatever, I would be a bit like, oh, that's pretty like switched on. That's pretty like forward thinking. Like, oh, they're on there like every week and they've got a Discord. Like, I know the numbers are small, but like I would personally be looking at that like, wow, that's interesting to see. Because I'm surprised not more people latched on to the Twitch thing, other than the fact that to set up the audio side of it is an absolute living nightmare. Like, if you don't have a little bit of technical background and like a little bit of problem solving ability, it's going nowhere. And honestly, the audio side of it took me forever to stream guitar stuff on it, which I actually don't even do anymore because not that many people are concerned with it. It's really weird. I thought people would kind of be like, oh my God, they're playing guitar, like, yay. But after like the 2 weeks of it, you're like, well, I've played all our songs and everybody's seen them and nobody is that fussed. And so it's more then I was like, oh, well, actually, it's more about the engagement and the conversation. And I kind of changed completely how we did it. So it was really like, yeah, it's been interesting to use, and I think it's really helped highlight, the fact that social media is make or break for a band. It's yeah, it was pretty big awakening, to be honest, of something I knew anyway, but like to actually see it and not be able to do anything but social media, it was really interesting.
Yeah, and it's
If I was still at
something.
uni,
Yeah.
if I was still at uni, I would definitely be like, can I write about this for my dissertation?
Well, it's something that I picked up on straight away, when looking into the band, and obviously, I think it is certainly a fantastic thing you're doing, and it will continue to grow. So, obviously, listeners, Godeater UK, find the band and check out all of this great work that they're doing. Ross, thank you for giving us your time. We've got one section left of the podcast, which we always have last, and that follows on from our live discussions, and it's called Setlist Science. So the question is, how much importance do you place into the structure of a set list, and have you got any rules that you tend to follow?
I'm going to be honest, I'm a freak with building a set list. Like, an absolute head case when it comes down to it. Like, people are always like, you can't be that bad, and I'm like, no, I really am. Like, sometimes the other guys will come and be like, oh, we should do these songs, and I'm like, well, you can't, because that song's in this key and this song's in that key, and you can't put them together because there's not an appropriate drop-off point to blend them together, and my brain starts working like overtime and trying to work it out. So I don't really know if there's like an official science to it. I don't think I could don a lab coat and say that, but there's definitely some theory behind it for me. Like, saying earlier about what singles to release and what order to put them in, it's almost like that, but applied in like the sort of live sense. Like, I would want to start with like a big song, and then you go into the second song and it kind of drops back a bit, and you kind of get people in and they kind of know what you're about, and then you can then start speeding up. You can slow down in the middle, and then you basically want to start and end strong. Like, that's what it kind of comes down to. Because if you're at a festival slot, people might catch your first song or your first two songs and then leave to see another band. And then people might catch your last song because they've come to see the band after you. So you want them to be like as strong as possible. We're a little bound sometimes by the fact that our songs like kind of run together. So normally I'll like do them in such a way that we're doing like kind of 2 or 3 kind of semi-joined together with little breaks. And number one rule in Godeater set kind of making: no dead space, no silence. There is never an actual moment of silence in our set, even between songs. Because we run the laptop with like tracks and stuff, there's always like even just an ambient sort of rumble. And since we started doing it, I've noticed how many bands don't do it.
Yeah.
And once I've noticed it, it's like glass shattering, and I get really annoyed by it.
No, I do love that, actually. The thought that goes into it. I'm a setlist geek myself. I pay a lot of attention to it, and you can tell the bands that also pay a lot of attention to it. And I love the idea of the no silence, having the ambient music there, because it does keep the interest up. There's nothing worse than just this awkward silence while there's a changeover or whatever's going on, and everyone's just sort of milling about like, all right, what's going next? But
you can hear the drummer kind of pedals and it's so annoying and like awkward to listen to. So I'm like, nah, keep the noise up, keep the energy up. Like, and people will know it's not stopping. Like, I think that's such an important thing to keep people engaged. Like, again, keep people engaged. Like, that's what it is at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, it is. And, actually, I think the most interesting point you made, and it's the first time I've actually heard it, but it is a really obvious thing, is relating to the festivals. A lot of people will perhaps catch the first couple of songs or the last couple of songs of a band. It's obviously, to strategically place, big hitters there to capture those people is really, really thoughtful. So,
I'm more kind of weirdly proud of
it. No, you should be. You should be.
Like, I think because every time I have to do a set for like tour or something, I have to like map it out, and I have to do all the tempo changes and make sure the click tracks work and make sure all the tracks are in the right place, so the orchestrations are here and the ambient guitars are there, and like just all that stuff. So there's so much more to it for us than just going, I'm going to play like these 6 songs. Oh, can we make this happen? Can we do another one another night? Like, I'm sure I saw Cattle Decapitation last week again, and I'm sure they changed their set list like just on the day, and I was like, I'm having a nervous breakdown. I'm like just thinking about that, like, no. Like Dream Theater, I'm sure used to have a mental thing about like they would base what they were going to play depending on like what they played last time and the distance to drive between a certain place, and I was like, okay, I'm not that mental, but like that's where I could probably end up if I didn't if we changed it every night, I could see myself getting that way real fast. So it's probably a good thing we don't.
Yeah, well, I remember interviewing Bowling for Soup a number of years ago, and actually they said, they have the first 2 songs are normally known, we're going to play this song and this song. And then basically the singer Jarrett calls it on the stage and has these silent cues to the other band members to say, oh, we're playing this song next or whatever song next. So they have no idea. They've never had a written set list. So yeah, that would obviously drive you mad.
Although, funny story, we have never actually written down a set list on a bit of paper ever. Not even typed it. Like, we've never done it. And people ask us like, oh, can I get a copy of the set list? And I'm like, I'm really sorry. Like, I can send you the text document, I guess, that I wrote it down. Like, is that cool? Like, I'll type sign it. It's okay, don't worry. But yeah, like I think because we just run the track and it's like half an hour or 45 minutes all the way through, and everybody has a copy of it in advance. Yeah. We just kind of like muscle memory it.
Yeah.
And that's that, and we just kind of go for it. I'm actually doing it like, well, I did it last weekend. I need to export all the tracks, but I'm in like set list making mode right now.
Well, yeah, no, excellent. I love it. I really enjoy that conversation around set list at the end of all these podcasts, and that was a really interesting one, Ross. So yeah, no, thank you again for giving us the time and coming on the podcast. Obviously, listeners, you need to be checking out Vespera when it comes out on the 30th, and obviously you need to be heading along to one of the shows. Again, Godeater UK is the place to go and do that, and obviously you can head to the link in the bio of the podcast to get there. So, what would be your final message today, Ross, for the listeners?
I mean, thanks for having me first. I hope people enjoy it. I hope people enjoy the conversation. If you checked out Godeater before, thank you very much. Please come to any shows we're doing this year, next year. Pre-order the album because it's still up for pre-order until it comes out. You can get a copy and you can get merch and stuff. Those packages are kind of semi-limited, so I would recommend if you do want to pre-order it, please do. Thanks for supporting the band ultimately, and if you do see us at a show or just hit us up, like, we're always down to chat, and yeah, I just hope people enjoy the album. At the end of the day, like, that's all I can really hope for at this point. Like, it sounds a little kind of begging and desperate, but like, I really do hope that people take away from it the same as we have in kind of making it, and I hope they enjoy it and share it with a friend. Share it with the friends, like the really important part.
Yeah. Definitely.
But yeah, just thank you to everybody who's kind of supported us so far, especially in those past few years. And yeah, I do just hope that the album, I guess, is worth the wait and people enjoy it. So
yeah, and again,
from me,
yeah, we've had a sneak peek and it definitely will be. So listeners, make sure you check that one out. Thank you so much, Ross.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you everyone for listening. I really do hope you enjoyed that chat there with Godeater. Make sure you do check out their single God Complex over on our Discover New Music playlist on Spotify, and of course follow the band on social media. And if you would, please do follow Full Pelt on social media. We are on Facebook at Full Pelt and on Twitter and Instagram at Full Pelt Music. And finally, if you would, please do hit that subscribe button, hit that like button wherever you're watching or listening, and we'll be back very soon for another episode of the Discover New Music podcast.